Argoed had been quiet for years, a quiet village where there was not much trouble, and life meandered along. People had their routines, their habits, their own tales. Okay, so there had been the occasional broken window, but nothing unusual, nothing to unsettle anyone. That peace, however, was set to be disrupted in a manner in which no one could have imagined. So Caris Yemm was a kind, generous young lady who was from Blackwood, Wales. She had just turned 22, her whole life ahead of her. She had completed a qualification in health and social care, a job testament to how compassionate she was. She was a giver, giving always ready to think about others more than herself. She worked doing retail work in Next after college, where her ready smile and contagious charm had built her up a large following of customers. To her family, Caris was more than a daughter or a sister. She was their spark, their energy, their wit and love. Her sister Shannon would later testify about the world that the family's world was shattered by what was done. It wasn't merely the tragedy of losing someone so young, it was the nightmare of what was done. Caris had dreams. She loved fashion, music, and hanging out with her friends. She didn't shy away from speaking her mind about what she believed mattered. Clever, tough, and kind, she was a young woman, still struggling to find her niche in the world like so many others. And then came Matthew Williams. Matthew Williams was 34. He had recently been released from prison and was staying at the Sirhowy Arms, a hostel for ex-offenders and vulnerable adults, a step towards rehabilitation for those who were trying to mend their lives. Caris and Matthew had never actually known each other. They'd known each other for mere weeks. They met one night when they went out together in Blackwood. He was older, attractive in his own right, and she, a people kind of woman who always tended to like the good of the people, gave him an opportunity. He did not realize Williams had a shaky past. His record that existed on paper contained only assaults, break-ins, and substance abuse. Worse, his mind was unraveling. In the days leading up to November 6th, he was out of control. Friends and relatives later reported that he was experiencing hallucinations. He was smoking amphetamines and methadone in a cycle of paranoia and hallucination. His own mother had begged officials to step in, reporting that the voices were once more there. Nothing was done. That night, Matthew and Caris came back to his hostel room together. And then the screaming started. It was 1:00 a.m. when the first of the emergency calls were made. Other hostel residents heard the commotion, yells, thuds, a woman's shrieking hysterics. One of the residents called 999. Another went from door to door, attempting to find the source of the commotion. Then they found it was room 7. Hostel owner Mandy Miles was one of the first to enter. She would be traumatized by what she saw. Blood was on the walls. It was like something from a film. And then she heard him. Matthew Williams was bending over Caris, his head down. He did not move when Mandy called out. Her son, who was with her, asked the question that would leave the nation reeling. "Well, are you eating her?" Police were there in minutes. The first officer on the scene was a lone female officer, then backup followed shortly after. What they found was chaos. Williams was out of control. The officers tased him once, twice, 3 times, 4. But still he struggled on, thrashing, biting, slamming his head on the ground. It took a number of officers to subdue him. Even then he wouldn't cease. By the time they reached Caris, however, it was too late. She had suffered at least 89 separate injuries, each one to her face and neck. The brutality of the assault shocked detectives. There were even reports that Williams had ripped out her eyes. The hostel, once just another building in a quiet village, was now a scene of crime, covered in forensic experts and flashing police lights. Williams was never taken to court. Hours after having been subdued by police, he died in police custody. A coroner would later determine that he had died of a combination of drug-induced psychosis, physical stress from the struggle, and undiagnosed schizophrenia. Argoed village was shocked. The villagers, who had hitherto lived in peace, were now at the center of a national nightmare. The media descended, and newspapers were left resorting to the use of words like cannibalism to describe what happened. The forensic report would later confirm that no flesh had indeed been consumed, but the sheer disgust of the attack had people struggling to come up with a word that was bad enough to describe it. Vera's family was left shattered. There would be no trial, no conviction, no justice. There was only loss. Her sister Shannon later recounted what happened. Every day is different. You worry, you think people are looking at you, you can't get out of your head. You're forever missing someone, missing something. Her brother became severely depressed. He lost his hair. He couldn't handle it. And the worst part? The lack of help? We were initially offered counseling and then they just shut that down, Shannon said. They told us to just go see the GP. But my brother is not a person who is going to just go into a GP and tell them, I need to talk to somebody. The questions that remained. Over the next few days there were tough questions asked of the system that had failed both Williams and Caris. How was it possible that a man with a proven record of violent outbursts, drug abuse, and untreated mental illness was released onto society unsupervised? His mother, crying afterwards, said, if Matthew had been given his meds and moved to another community, all of this could have been prevented. But it wasn't. Warning signs were disregarded, and because of that, a promising young woman was taken from this world in the most violent way possible. For Argoed, for Caris's family, and for all who watched this case unfold, the terror of that night would never be forgotten.